Hello and welcome to lesson 1 of week 10. This is the start of part 2 of this course. And in this part of the course, we're going to look at advanced HTML, CSS, and responsive web design. This part of the course is going to span over 6 weeks. And in that 6 weeks, we are only going to deal with advanced topics and mobile first design. My name is Mildred. In this lesson, we are going to look at the viewport and the grid view. When we say a web page is responsive, we mean that it resizes or moves the content to fit the screen size. Now, with the advancement in technology, we have different types of devices and different screen sizes. And for us to be able to design web pages that are responsive or to give the users a very good user experience, we need to create our pages such that it resizes and expands or move content around based on the device of the user. CSS3 gives us the grid view, media queries. HTML5 gives us the viewport. And we are going to combine all of this to see how we can build a responsive web page. In part 1, we looked at the meta tag and we talked about the viewport. The viewport is the visible area of the screen of the user. The value of the content attribute for the viewport has this width part, which means that set the width of the content to be equal to the width of the device. The initial scale is the initial zoom level when the page first loads. We are going to use our external style sheet to apply style to this page. When a web page is responsive, the users do not get the vertical scroll bar or do not have to zoom out to see the whole content of the page. We are going to look at the CSS grid view. But before then, the first style you want on your page is to apply a style to all elements so that the padding and the border are calculated in the total height and width of all elements of the page. And we do this using the box sizing property, and we set it to border box. The asterisk sign indicates all elements, so this is going to be the first thing you have on your style sheet. To use the grid view, it means that we are dividing the page into columns. It must have a total of 12 columns with a total size of the width to be 100%. So how do we calculate the grid view? We want to have 12 columns on the page. And we want the total of the 12 to be 100%, which means that to get the first column, we'll divide 100 by 12, which is going to give us 8.33%. To get the second column, we multiply 8.33 by 2, third 8.33 by 3. Make sure you always round up to 2 decimal place. I have done this calculation before the lesson, so the pattern is to use 100 divided by 12 to get the first column width, the first column width times 2 to get the second, the first times 3 to get the third, and like that up until 12, where the total must be 100%. That column width of the total of 100%, which we have 12 columns, forms one row on the page. So we'll define a style called with a class of row. But what we want to set using the after pseudo element, we want to make sure that after this, we want to clear both left and right, and then we want the display value to the table. Now recall that we said we had two main types of display in CSS. In part 1, we had the block and the inline elements. Those are for HTML elements, but we will have several display values that we rarely use except in special circumstances like this, where we want this to behave like a table without having to use the table properties. You can read more about advanced display values and see when they are needed, but most of the time elements are either inline elements or they are block elements. When we want to change the display of elements, then we begin to use different types of values aside inline and block. So when you set the row and you use the after studio element to clear both sides, and the reason we are clearing this is because we are going to create the columns. Now we want something for the first column. We said that the first column has a width of 8.33%. We want to create another class for the second column. And we'll say the second column is going to be 8.33 times 2, which is going to give us 16.66%. So we've specified the width for each column, and the total width by the time it is the 12th column should be equal to 100%. Now, don't worry if you don't understand it yet. As we go along, you're going to understand why it is done this way. We have the attribute selector in CSS, and I'm not sure we discussed that. And what we do is to put an element. Let's say we have an A tag, and we want to apply style based on an attribute. Let's say we want to apply style based on the target attribute that has the value of blank. So this is how we use attribute selector in CSS. You put in the element or the class, the name of the attribute, and the value, and apply style to this element based on its attributes and value. So the style we want to apply now is, we want every class attribute, right, that has a value of call, and all of them have call 1, call 2. So we have a call and hyphen, and want to apply a style to this. We want to make sure that all of the columns are floated to the left. And this is the reason why we are clearing both for each row. And we might want to put a padding. And let's say we put a padding of 10 px. So these are the standard styles that you will put on your style sheets initially to start the process of responsive web design on a page. And this is how we create the grid view for the page. In the next lesson, we are going to look at HTML5 layouts and media queries, and then we are going to move on to start building a responsive web page.